At my son's wedding, bride put widow boss in kitchen, so she cancelled it all. Welcome back and enjoy the story. Ellen Montgomery stood at the threshold of the grand ballroom at the Parkview Manor, a five-star venue overlooking Central Park. Her champagne-colored dress, purchased 3 months ago from an exclusive boutique on Fifth Avenue, caught the light in subtle waves as she surveyed the space that would host her only son's wedding. The chandeliers cast a warm glow over the immaculate place settings, the floral arrangements of white roses and blue hydrangeas perfuming the air with a delicate fragrance. Everything was perfect, just as she had planned, just as she had paid. For a lump formed in Ellen's throat as she thought of Harold, her late husband. He should have been here to see their son marry, to walk with Brandon down the aisle, to shake hands with guests, to make the father of the groom speech she had so carefully prepared in his absence. 15 years had passed since the heart attack that took him at 48, leaving her with a 12-year-old son and a struggling business that barely kept their modest apartment paid for. Now at 63, Ellen was the CEO of Montgomery Enterprises, a commercial real estate development firm that had grown under her guidance to become one of the most respected in New York City. From the ashes of near bankruptcy, she had built an empire, working 18-hour days, sacrificing weekends, vacations, and even potential relationships to secure her son's future and honor Harold's legacy. Mrs. Montgomery, a young woman in a black suit, approached, clipboard in hand. The caterers need your signature on the final approval form. Ellen nodded, taking the clipboard. Today was Brandon's day. Her 27-year-old son was marrying Delilah Parker, the daughter of a banking family from Connecticut. The girl was beautiful, Harvard-educated, and possessed a certain coolness that Ellen had attributed to good breeding. Still, something about Delilah had always kept Ellen at arm's length, a polite but impenetrable wall between them, despite Ellen's attempts to welcome her into the family. As Ellen handed back the signed form, she caught sight of Brandon across the room. His dark hair, so like Harold's, was neatly combed, his tall frame carrying the bespoke suit she had commissioned from Harold's old tailor on Savile Row. His face lit up when he spotted her, and for a moment, Ellen saw her little boy again, the one who used to run to her with scraped knees and homework questions. "Mom!" Brandon crossed the ballroom, weaving through the staff who were putting final touches on the table arrangements. "Everything looks incredible," Ellen smiled, reaching up to straighten his already perfect tie. "Your father would be so proud of you today." Something flickered across Brandon's face. Discomfort, perhaps? He glanced over his shoulder, and Ellen followed his gaze to where Delilah stood with her mother, inspecting the flower arrangements. Delilah's wedding dress was a marvel of design, its intricate lace bodice giving way to a flowing silk skirt that seemed to float around her. The dress had cost more than Ellen's first apartment, but she hadn't minded. This was Brandon's happiness. This was her gift. "Have you spoken with Delilah today?" Brandon asked, his voice carrying a note of tension. "Not yet," Ellen replied, noticing how her son's shoulders remained tight. "I wanted to give her space to get ready with her mother and bridesmaids. Is everything all right?" Brandon nodded too quickly. "Yes, of course. It's just, there's been a slight change to the seating arrangements. Delilah wanted to talk to you about it." Before Ellen could respond, Delilah glided over, her expression composed and cool. Close up, Ellen could see the exquisite detail of the veil. She had commissioned from a renowned designer in Paris. "Ellen," Delilah said, not quite meeting her eyes, "could I speak with you for a moment?" Ellen followed her future daughter-in-law to a quiet corner of the ballroom, aware of Brandon trailing behind them like a nervous shadow. Delilah turned, her perfectly made-up face expressionless. "We've had to make some last-minute adjustments," Delilah began, her voice smooth as glass. "My mother's side of the family brought more guests than expected, and the head table has become a bit crowded." Ellen waited, sensing there was more. "Brandon and I think it would be best if you could help us by monitoring things from the kitchen area during the reception," Delilah continued, as if discussing a minor schedule change. "The caterers could use some supervision, and it would ensure everything runs smoothly with the food service." Ellen felt as if the air had been sucked from the room. She looked at Brandon, waiting for him to interject, to correct this absurdity. Her son, her only child, for whom she had rebuilt a life from the ground up after Harold's death, stood silent, his gaze fixed on the polished marble floor. "You want me to sit in the kitchen?" Ellen clarified, her voice steady despite the tremor she felt inside. "Not at my son's wedding reception," Delilah smiled thinly. "It's just for the dinner portion. The seating is quite tight and someone needs to keep an eye on the timing of the courses. Who better than you? You're so capable." Ellen looked at the woman who was about to become her daughter-in-law, at the cold calculation in her eyes, and then at her son, who still wouldn't meet her gaze. In that moment, she understood with perfect clarity what she meant to them. A checkbook, a planner, a background figure who had served her purpose and could now be tucked away where she wouldn't intrude on their picture-perfect day. The ballroom suddenly felt vast and empty, despite the dozens of workers bustling about. The flowers she had selected, the linens she had approved, the champagne she had imported, all of it seemed to mock her with its beauty, a stage set for a play in which she'd been demoted from supporting cast to stagehand. "I see," Ellen said quietly. "Brandon, is this what you want?" Her son finally looked up, his face a mask of discomfort and embarrassment. "Dell's family is very traditional, Mom. They expect certain things. It's just for a few hours and you know better than anyone how to make sure the kitchen runs on schedule." Ellen felt something inside her shift, like tectonic plates realigning. She had spent 15 years building a company, growing a fortune, creating opportunities, not just for herself, but for her son. She had paid for his education at Princeton, bought his first apartment in Manhattan, funded the startup capital for his own investment firm. And now she was being asked to hide in the kitchen at his wedding, the $150,000 event she had financed, down to the last orchid petal. "I understand," she said, her voice calm, betraying none of the seismic activity occurring beneath her composed exterior. "If you'll excuse me, I need to check on something." Ellen walked away from them with measured steps, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. She passed through the grand entrance hall where guests would soon arrive, past the gift table already stacked with elegantly wrapped packages, and into a small side room that had been designated as the coordinator's office for the day. The wedding coordinator, a harried woman named Jessica, looked up from her laptop with a smile that quickly faded as she registered Ellen's expression. "Mrs. Montgomery, is everything all right?" Ellen closed the door behind her and took a seat across from Jessica's makeshift desk. "No," she said simply, "it's not." For a moment, Ellen contemplated the weight of what she was about to do. She thought of the guests who had flown in from across the country, the months of planning, the hope she had that this marriage might bring her closer to her increasingly distant son. But then she thought of the kitchen, of sitting among the clatter, of dishes and the shouts of line cooks, while her only child celebrated with everyone except her. "I need you to cancel the wedding," Ellen said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Immediately." Jessica's eyes widened. "Mrs. Montgomery, the ceremony starts in 2 hours." "All the contracts are in my name," Ellen continued, as if the coordinator hadn't spoken. "All the vendors have been paid by me. I want everything shut down now." Jessica stared at her, clearly trying to determine if this was some sort of test or joke. "Ma'am, I don't think—" "Call the catering manager, tell them to pack up and—" "Leave. Call the florist and have them retrieve their arrangements. Call the band and tell them their services won't be needed. The bar staff, the waiters, the photographer, everyone. I want this venue empty within the hour." Jessica's professional composure cracked. "Mrs. Montgomery, your son—" "My son," Ellen said, with a calm that surprised even her, "has made his choice, and now I'm making mine." The coordinator looked, as though she might argue further, but something in Ellen's steady gaze stopped her. This wasn't a bride having cold feet or a tantrum over centerpieces. This was the steel spine of a woman who had rebuilt her life once before and wasn't afraid to do it again. Jessica picked up her phone. Within 20 minutes, a ripple of confusion began to spread through the venue. Ellen sat quietly in the coordinator's office, listening to the rising murmur of voices, the quickening footsteps in the hallway. She didn't feel victorious or vindicated. She felt oddly peaceful, as if she'd set down a burden she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. The door burst open and Brandon stood there, his face flushed with panic and anger. "Mom, what's happening? The caterers are packing up and the band just left. Jessica says you cancelled everything. This has to be a mistake." Ellen looked at her son, this young man she had raised alone, this person she had centered her life. Around for 15 years, she loved him. That hadn't changed, but something else had, her willingness to be invisible. "It's not a mistake, Brandon," she said gently. "I've cancelled the wedding." "You can't do that." His voice cracked with disbelief. "People are arriving. Delilah's family can take their traditional expectations elsewhere," Ellen finished for him. "I've spent my entire life making sure you had every opportunity, every advantage. I've never asked for recognition or gratitude, but I will not be hidden away at your wedding like something shameful." Brandon's face contorted with a mixture of rage and desperation. "This is insane. You can't just ruin everything because your feelings are hurt. This isn't about you." "You're right," Ellen agreed, rising from her chair. "It's not about me. It's about respect. It's about remembering who helped you become the man you are today. It's about standing up for your mother when someone tries to diminish her." Brandon's shoulders slumped, his anger giving way to something like defeat. "Mom, please, we can fix this. You can sit at the head table. Delilah will understand." Ellen shook her head. "No, Brandon, some things can't be fixed with a seating rearrangement." She stepped around him and headed for the door. "I'm going home now. I suggest you start making some calls." As Ellen walked through the now chaotic venue, she passed Delilah, who stood in the center of the ballroom, looking shell-shocked as servers removed table settings around her. The young woman's perfect composure had cracked, her face a mask of fury and disbelief. Their eyes met briefly, and Ellen saw recognition dawn in her almost daughter-in-law's gaze, the understanding that she had gravely miscalculated. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured grounds of the venue. Ellen's driver, sensing the change in plans, hurried to open the car door for her. As she slid into the back seat of the luxury sedan, Ellen caught sight of guests arriving, their faces confused as they were turned away at the entrance. "Where to, Mrs. Montgomery?" her driver asked. Ellen thought for a moment. Not her penthouse on Park Avenue, not the office where she'd spent countless late nights building her empire. "The Harbor Cafe on West Street," she said finally. It had been Harold's favorite place, a simple waterfront restaurant where they'd spent many Sunday mornings early in their marriage, before success, before children, when they were just two people in love with dreams bigger than their bank account. As the car pulled away from the chaos she'd created, Ellen felt no regret. She had spent 15 years honoring Harold's memory by raising their son and growing their company. But somewhere along the way, she had stopped honoring herself. The Harbor Cafe was nearly empty when she arrived, the dinner rush still a few hours away. Ellen chose a table on the outdoor patio overlooking the Hudson River, where the setting sun painted the water in shades of gold and crimson. She ordered a pot of Earl Grey tea and watched the small boats drifting on the current. Her phone vibrated incessantly in her purse, but she ignored it. There would be time for explanations. Later, time for reconciliation, perhaps, if Brandon could understand the lesson she was trying to teach him. But for now, Ellen Montgomery sat alone as dusk settled over New York City, not a heartbroken mother or a vengeful boss, but simply a woman who had finally remembered her own worth. If you are enjoying the story, type 5 in the comments and subscribe for more videos like this. If not, type 0. It helps me create even better content for you. Continuing. The tea arrived steaming in a small ceramic pot, accompanied by a slice of lemon and a pot of honey, just as Harold used to take it. Ellen poured a cup and added a small spoonful of honey, watching as it dissolved into the amber liquid. It had been a long time since she'd allowed herself this kind of quiet moment. Running Montgomery Enterprises consumed most of her waking hours, and what little free time she had was often spent attending charity galas and business functions to maintain the network of connections that kept the company thriving. As the warmth of the tea spread through her, Ellen found her thoughts turning not to Brandon or Delilah, or the wedding disaster unfolding across town, but to Harold. What would he have thought of today's events? Harold had been gentle but firm, a man who believed in fairness above all else. He had built their early business on handshake deals and kept his word even when it cost him. Would he have understood her decision to cancel the wedding, or would he have counseled patience, forgiveness? "Mrs. Montgomery?" Ellen looked up to find Jessica, the wedding coordinator, standing beside her table. The young woman's professional attire was slightly disheveled, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and nervous determination. "May I join you for a moment?" Jessica asked. Ellen gestured to the empty chair across from her. "How did you find me?" "Your driver," Jessica admitted, sitting down. "I hope you don't mind. I thought you should know what's happening." Ellen sipped her tea. "Is my son all right?" Jessica hesitated. "He's angry, confused. The Parker family is threatening legal action, though I'm not sure on what grounds since all the contracts were in your name." "And Delilah?" "She left with her parents about 30 minutes ago. Most of the guests have gone too." Jessica fiddled with the napkin on the table. "I've worked as a wedding coordinator for 7 years, Mrs. Montgomery. I've seen bridezillas, groomzillas, mother-in-law disasters, you name it. But I've never seen anything like this." Ellen set down her teacup. "Are you here to convince me to change my mind? Because if so—" "No," Jessica interrupted, surprising Ellen. "I'm here because I think you did something kind of amazing." Ellen raised an eyebrow. "What they asked you to do, what your son allowed, it was wrong." Jessica continued, her words gaining confidence. "I've coordinated over 200 weddings, and I've seen how mothers get sidelined, especially mothers who've done it all on their own. But you didn't just take it. You showed them exactly what you're worth." Despite herself, Ellen felt a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "That wasn't my intention. I just couldn't bear the thought of sitting in that kitchen, listening to the celebration through the swinging doors." Jessica leaned forward. "Can I be honest with you? Please. I don't think this was really about the seating arrangement. I've been working with Ms. Parker for months now, and I've seen how she talks to you, how she dismisses your input, how she's been slowly pushing you out of your son's life. Today was just the final move." Ellen felt a tightness in her chest at the confirmation of what she had suspected, but hadn't wanted to believe. "Brandon is all I have," she said quietly. "No," Jessica said firmly. "You have yourself. You have the respect of everyone who works for you, and believe me, the vendors all respect you even now, especially now. You have a life you've built. With your own 2 hands. Your son is important, but he's not the sum total of who you are." Ellen stared at this young woman she barely knew, feeling the truth of her words settle into her bones. Harold had always told her she was more than just his wife, more than just Brandon's mother. Somewhere along the way she had forgotten that. "Thank you, Jessica," Ellen said. "That's refreshing to hear." Jessica nodded and stood up. "For what it's worth, I think Brandon will come around. He looked pretty shell-shocked after you left, like he was seeing something clearly for the first time." As Jessica walked away, Ellen turned back to the river, now darkening as night fell over the city. The lights of boats moved slowly across the water, and the skyline began to twinkle with illuminated windows. She ordered another pot of tea and sat in the growing darkness, thinking about fresh starts and second chances. It was nearly 9:00 when Ellen finally returned to her penthouse. The doorman greeted her with his usual respect, giving no indication that he might have heard about the wedding debacle, though news traveled fast in New York's elite circles. Her apartment was quiet and dark when she entered, the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city lights. Ellen slipped off her heels and padded across the marble floor to the kitchen, where she poured herself a small glass of brandy. She rarely drank alone, but tonight seemed to call for it. The silence was broken by a soft knock at her door. Ellen froze, the brandy halfway to her lips. It was too late for casual visitors, which meant whoever was on the other side of that door was here because of what had happened today. Setting down her glass, Ellen walked to the door and checked the security monitor. Brandon stood in the hallway, his tie loosened, his suit jacket missing, his hair disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. Ellen opened the door, but didn't invite him in. "Mom," Brandon said, his voice hoarse. "Can we talk?" Ellen studied her son's face, the dark circles under his eyes, the redness that suggested he might have been crying. Despite everything, her heart ached for him. "It's late, Brandon. I know. I'm sorry, but I don't think this can wait until tomorrow." After a moment's hesitation, Ellen stepped aside to let him enter. Brandon walked past her into the living room but remained standing, too agitated to sit. "What you did today," he began, then faltered. "I don't even know what to say." "I think thank you might be appropriate," Ellen replied, returning to the kitchen to retrieve her brandy. "Would you like a drink?" Brandon stared at her. "Thank you? You cancelled my wedding. Delilah's parents are talking about suing us for emotional distress. Her grandmother had a panic attack and had to be taken to the hospital. Half of New York society saw me get left at the altar by my own mother." Ellen took a deliberate sip of her brandy. "I didn't leave you at the altar, Brandon. I refused to be treated like a servant at my only child's wedding, a wedding I paid for, planned, and poured my heart into. It was just seating, Mom, one dinner." "No," Ellen said firmly, "it wasn't just seating. It was Delilah making it clear that I wasn't worthy of sitting with her family. It was you standing by and letting her do it." Brandon began to pace the room, his agitation visible in every movement. "You don't understand. Delilah's family is old money, Mom. They have expectations, traditions. I was trying to fit in, to make a good impression." "By hiding your mother in the kitchen?" Ellen asked, her voice soft but cutting. "What impression do you think that made, Brandon? That you're a man who allows the woman who raised him to be disrespected? That you value status over family?" Brandon stopped pacing and sank onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. "I messed up, I know I messed up. But did you have to blow up everything? Couldn't you have just, I don't know, talked to me about it?" Ellen set down her glass and moved to sit beside her son. "Would you have listened, really listened? Or would you have placated me and done what Delilah wanted anyway?" The silence that followed was answer. "Enough." "Brandon," Ellen said gently, "when your father died, I promised myself two things: that I would give you every opportunity in life, and that I would raise you to be a man of character. I think I succeeded at the first, but today made me wonder if I failed at the second." Brandon looked up, his eyes damp. "That's not fair, isn't it? You stood there while your fiancé told me to my face that I wasn't good enough to sit at your wedding table. The same wedding I paid for, the same wedding I spent months helping to plan. And you said nothing. I was caught in the middle." Brandon protested. "Delilah's family." "Stop," Ellen interrupted. "Just stop with Delilah's family. This isn't about them. This is about you and me. This is about you becoming a man who values other people's opinions over your own mother's. Dignity." Brandon fell silent, his shoulders slumping in defeat. For a long moment neither of them spoke, the only sound the distant hum of the city below them. "I don't know what to do now," Brandon finally said, his voice small, almost childlike. "Delilah won't return my calls. Her father threatened to blackball me from every major financial institution in the city. Everything's ruined." Ellen felt a pang of sympathy despite everything. "Not everything," she corrected him, "just your wedding. And my relationship, and possibly my career. If your career can be destroyed by one man, it wasn't much of a career to begin with," Ellen pointed out. "And if Delilah won't even talk to you after one setback, what kind of partner would she have been when real challenges came along?" Brandon looked at her, a flash of anger returning to his eyes. "That's easy for you to say. You're the one who caused this setback, as you call it." "No," Ellen said firmly. "I'm the one who responded to it. The setback was when you two decided I wasn't worthy of basic respect." Brandon had no response to that. He stared down at his hands, twisting his fingers together in a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. "What happens now?" he finally asked. Ellen studied her son, this young man who looked so much like Harold, but had somehow missed inheriting his father's unwavering sense of right and wrong. "That depends on you," she told him, "on what you've learned from today." "What I've learned?" Brandon repeated incredulously. That my mother will destroy my happiness if she doesn't get her way. Ellen shook her head, disappointment settling heavily in her chest. That's what you think happened today? That I was having a tantrum because I didn't get my way? What would you call it? I'd call it a moment of clarity, Ellen said. A moment when I realized that I've spent 15 years enabling you to become the kind of man who would watch his mother be disrespected and do nothing to stop it. The words hung in the air between them, harsh but true. Brandon flinched as if she'd struck him. I think you should go, Ellen said quietly. It's late, and we're both exhausted. Nothing productive will come from continuing this conversation. Tonight. Brandon stood, hesitating as if he wanted to say more but couldn't find the words. What am I supposed to tell people? He asked finally. The truth would be refreshing, Ellen suggested. But I suspect you'll come up with something that saves face. Brandon walked to the door, his movements heavy with fatigue and defeat. With his hand on the doorknob, he paused and looked back at his mother. I do love you, Mom, even if you don't believe that right now. Ellen felt her heart constrict. I know you do, Brandon, I've never doubted that, but love without respect isn't enough. Not anymore. After Brandon left, Ellen moved to the windows that lined her living room, looking out at the city spread below her like a carpet of stars. In the reflection of the glass she could see herself, still elegant in her champagne-colored dress, her posture straight despite the emotional weight of the day. She looked strong. She looked like a woman who knew her own worth. Tomorrow, there would be fallout to deal with. There would be gossip and probably some professional repercussions. New York's elite circles were small and interconnected, and Ellen had no doubt that the Parkers would do their best to smear her name. But she had weathered worse storms. She had rebuilt a business from near bankruptcy, raised a child alone, and carved out a place for herself in an industry dominated by men. She would survive this too. Ellen raised her glass in a silent toast to her reflection. For the first time in a very long time, she felt truly, completely awake. But what happens next will change everything she thought she knew about her family, her business, and herself. What seemed like the end is actually just the beginning of the most transformative chapter of Ellen Montgomery's life. The next morning dawned bright and clear, sunlight streaming through the blinds Ellen had forgotten to close the night before. She woke with a start, momentarily disoriented before the events of yesterday came flooding back. The wedding, the kitchen, the cancellation, Brandon. Ellen reached for her phone on the nightstand, mentally preparing herself for the barrage of missed calls and messages that would surely be waiting. To her surprise, there were only a handful, 2 from her assistant at Montgomery Enterprises, 1 from Jessica, the wedding coordinator, and 1 from her sister, Caroline, who lived in Boston and had been scheduled to attend the wedding. Nothing from Brandon. Ellen showered and dressed with deliberate care, choosing a steel gray suit that had always made her feel powerful during difficult negotiations. Today would require armor, and she knew it. By the time she arrived at the Montgomery Enterprises headquarters in Midtown, the rumors had clearly spread. The usually bustling reception area fell into a hush as she strode through, heads turning to watch her pass. Ellen kept her chin up, her expression neutral, acknowledging the greetings of her employees with the same professional courtesy she always showed. Her assistant, Marcus, was waiting outside her office, his face a mixture of concern and cautious curiosity. "Good morning, Mrs. Montgomery," he said, falling into step beside her. "I've moved your 9 o'clock to tomorrow and cleared your morning schedule. I thought you might need some time to address personal matters." Ellen appreciated his tact. "Thank you, Marcus. That was thoughtful, but I'd prefer to keep to my regular schedule as much as possible." "Who was my 9 o'clock?" Marcus hesitated. "Mr. Layton from First Capital Bank." Ellen paused at her office door. James Layton was one of the most influential banking executives in the city and a close friend of Arthur Parker, Delilah's father. "I see. Was a reason given for the cancellation?" "His assistant said something came up unexpectedly," Marcus replied, his tone making it clear he didn't believe it for a second. Ellen nodded. "Keep me informed of any other sudden cancellations, And Marcus? Yes, Mrs. Montgomery? If the press calls, direct them to our PR department. No comments from me or anyone on my executive team. As Marcus hurried off to execute her instructions, Ellen entered her office and closed the door behind her. The space was a reflection of her success, spacious and elegantly appointed, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a commanding view of the Manhattan skyline. On her desk sat a small framed photograph of Harold holding a 5-year-old Brandon on his shoulders, both of them laughing at the camera. It was one of the few personal touches in an otherwise business-focused environment. Ellen had just settled in to review the quarterly projections when her private line rang. The number on the display wasn't one she recognized. "Ellen Montgomery," she answered. "Mrs. Montgomery, this is Vivian Green from the New York Business Journal." Ellen's grip on the phone tightened. The Business Journal was the most respected business publication in the city, known for its in-depth profiles and unsparing analysis of the city's economic powerhouses. "How can I help you, Ms. Green?" Ellen asked, keeping her voice neutral. "I'm calling about the incident at Parkview Manor yesterday," the journalist said without preamble. "We've received several reports that you cancelled your son's wedding mere hours before the ceremony. Would you care to comment?" Ellen took a measured breath. "Ms. Green, I'm sure you understand that family matters are private. I have no comment at this time. Sources close to the Parker family claim you acted irrationally after a minor disagreement over seating arrangements," Vivian pressed. "They say you've been under significant stress due to Montgomery Enterprises' rumored financial difficulties." "I'm going to stop you right there," Ellen interrupted, her tone sharpening. "Montgomery Enterprises is in excellent financial health, as our publicly filed reports clearly demonstrate. Any suggestion to the contrary is not only false, but potentially libelous." There was a brief pause on the line. "So you deny the company is having financial problems?" "Categorically," Ellen confirmed. "As for the other matter, as I said, I have no comment on private family events." "Mrs. Montgomery, our readers—" "Your readers," Ellen cut in smoothly, "are welcome to review our company's performance metrics, which set a 5-year record high last quarter. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a business to run." Ellen hung up before the journalist could respond, her heart racing despite her outward composure. So the Parkers were already at work, spreading rumors about Montgomery Enterprises' financial stability, a particularly devious move in an industry where confidence and reputation were everything. Her intercom buzzed. "Mrs. Montgomery, Mr. Reed from the board is here to see you," Marcus announced. "He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent." William Reed was the longest-serving member of Montgomery Enterprises' board of directors, and had been one of Harold's closest friends. If he was here unannounced, the situation was escalating faster than Ellen had anticipated. "Send him in," she instructed. William entered a moment later, his tall frame slightly stooped, with age but his shrewd eyes as sharp as ever. At 72, he had seen the company through its earliest days, its near collapse after Harold's death, and its remarkable resurgence under Ellen's leadership. "Ellen," he greeted her, closing the door firmly behind him. "We need to talk." Ellen gestured to the seating area by the windows. "I assume this is about yesterday." William settled into one of the leather chairs, studying her carefully. "Half the city is talking about yesterday, Ellen. Arthur Parker is telling anyone who'll listen that you had some kind of breakdown. He's calling board members, investors, even some of our major clients." "And what exactly is he saying?" Ellen asked, taking the seat opposite him. "That you're unstable, that Montgomery Enterprises is in trouble, and you're cracking under the pressure, that the wedding fiasco was just a symptom of deeper problems." William leaned forward. "Ellen, I've known you for 30 years. I know none of that is true, but perception matters in this business, and right now, the perception isn't good." Ellen felt a flicker of anger. "So you want me to what, William? Issue a public apology? Beg the Parkers for forgiveness? Pretend that being asked to sit in the kitchen at my son's wedding was perfectly acceptable?" William's bushy eyebrows shot up. "They asked you to do what?" Ellen recounted the events leading up to her decision to cancel the wedding, keeping her tone even and factual. William's expression darkened with each detail. "I didn't know," he said when she finished. "The story going around is much different." "I'm not surprised," Ellen replied. Arthur Parker wouldn't want people to know. His daughter tried to humiliate the woman who was paying for her wedding. William was quiet for a moment, thinking. The board is calling an emergency meeting this afternoon. Arthur's been stirring up enough concern that they feel they need to address it. Let me guess, I'm not invited. Actually, they specifically want you there 3 o'clock. William stood, straightening his suit jacket. For what it's worth, Ellen, I would have done exactly what you did. Harold would have too. The mention of her late husband brought an unexpected lump to Ellen's throat. Thank you, William. After he left, Ellen turned to the large windows, gazing out at the city that had been both battlefield and kingdom to her over the past 15 years. She had fought for every inch of ground Montgomery Enterprises now occupied in the competitive landscape of New York real estate. She wasn't about to lose it over one cancelled wedding, no matter how well connected the Parkers might be. Ellen spent the next few hours preparing for the board meeting, compiling performance reports and financial statements that would refute any suggestion that the company was struggling. She worked through lunch, barely noticing when Marcus left, a sandwich on her desk with a supportive note. At precisely 3 o'clock, Ellen walked into the boardroom, her head held high. The long mahogany table was surrounded by 9 men and 2 women, the collective power of Montgomery Enterprises leadership. Several faces turned away as she entered, avoiding eye contact, but a few, William included, offered encouraging nods. Thank you all for coming, Ellen said, taking her place at the head of the table. I understand there are concerns that need to be addressed. Richard Hartwell, the vice chairman, cleared his throat. Ellen, we've all heard about what happened yesterday. While we sympathize with any personal difficulties you might be experiencing, the company's reputation must be our primary concern. Ellen smiled thinly. I appreciate your concern, Richard, but let's be clear about what's happening here. Arthur Parker is using his influence to spread false rumors about Montgomery Enterprises because I refused to let his daughter treat me disrespectfully at my son's wedding. A wedding I paid for, I might add. She distributed the financial reports she had prepared. As you can see, our fiscal health is excellent. Third-quarter profits exceeded projections by 12%. Our development in Brooklyn is ahead of schedule and under budget, and we just secured the Lincoln Square project. Over 4 competitors. The board members flipped through the documents, some with obvious relief. Ellen continued, her voice steady and confident. Now, if there are legitimate business concerns to discuss, I'm happy to address them. But if we're here because Arthur Parker's feelings are hurt, I suggest we all get back to work. William Reed chuckled softly, breaking the tension. Several others followed suit, and Ellen could see the mood shifting. By the end of the hour, the board had unanimously affirmed their confidence in her leadership and agreed on a statement to counter the rumors. Montgomery Enterprises was thriving under Ellen Montgomery's continued guidance, and any suggestions to the contrary were baseless. As the meeting concluded, Ellen felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had weathered the first challenge, but she knew it wouldn't be the last. Walking back to her office, Ellen was surprised to find Jessica, the wedding coordinator, waiting by Marcus's desk. The young woman looked considerably more composed than she had the previous evening. Mrs. Montgomery, Jessica greeted her. I hope I'm not intruding. I wanted to return this. She held out a thick envelope, the final payment check for her coordination services. Ellen raised an eyebrow. You earned that money, Jessica. The cancellation wasn't your fault. Jessica shook her head. I can't accept payment for a wedding that didn't happen. Besides, she added with a small smile, I think you taught me something valuable yesterday, about standing up for yourself even when it costs you something. Ellen studied the younger woman thoughtfully. Have you had lunch? She asked abruptly. 20 minutes later, they were seated at a quiet corner table in Ellen's favorite restaurant near the office. Over salads and iced tea, Ellen found herself increasingly impressed by Jessica's insights and business acumen. How long have you been coordinating weddings? Ellen asked. 7 years, Jessica replied. Before that, I was getting my MBA at Columbia while working part-time for an event planning company. Ellen set down her fork. You have an MBA from Columbia and you're coordinating weddings? Jessica laughed. The job market was tough when I graduated. Event planning paid the bills and I discovered I was good at it. But honestly, she leaned forward slightly, I've been thinking about a change, something more challenging. An idea began to form in Ellen's mind. Montgomery Enterprises had been looking to expand into commercial property management, a natural extension of their development business. They needed someone organized, detail-oriented, with experience handling high-pressure situations and difficult clients. Jessica, Ellen began, how would you feel about coming to work for Montgomery Enterprises? By the time they finished lunch, Ellen had offered Jessica a position as director of the new property management division, and Jessica had enthusiastically accepted. That was an impulsive decision by Ellen's usual standards, but something about the young woman's poise and principles had resonated with her. As they parted outside the restaurant, Jessica hesitated. There's something else you should know, she said. Brandon called me this morning. He wanted information about all the vendors, who they were, how to contact them. Ellen frowned. Did he say why? No, but he sounded determined. Not angry anymore. Just focused. Ellen thanked her for the information and headed back to the office, puzzling over Brandon's intentions. Was he planning to try to reschedule the wedding, to arrange some kind of smaller ceremony, or was it something else entirely? She got her answer 3 hours later when Marcus buzzed her intercom. Mrs. Montgomery, your son is here to see you. Brandon entered her office looking remarkably different from the disheveled, emotional young man who had appeared at her door the night before. He was clean-shaven, impeccably dressed in one of his best suits, his posture straight and confident. Mom, he greeted her, his voice steady. Can we talk? Ellen gestured to the seating area. Of course. Is this about the vendors? Brandon looked surprised. Jessica told you? She mentioned you'd called her, yes. Brandon took a seat, his expression serious but calm. I've spent the day making calls, he began, to all the vendors, to our guests, to the venue. I've issued refunds from my personal accounts to cover your deposits. I've sent apologies to everyone who traveled to be there. Ellen watched him carefully, trying to gauge his mood. That must have been difficult. It was, Brandon admitted, but it needed to be done. And it needed to be done. By me, not by you. A small glimmer of hope kindled in Ellen's chest, but she kept her expression neutral. And Delilah? Brandon looked down at his hands. We talked this morning, a long talk about expectations, about family, about respect. He looked up to meet Ellen's gaze. She's gone back to Connecticut with her parents. We're not getting married. Ellen felt a complex wave of emotions, relief, sadness for her son's pain, and a cautious pride in the maturity he was showing. I'm sorry, Brandon. Don't be, he said, surprising her. You were right, Mom, about everything, about how I let her treat you, about what that said about me as a person. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of Harold that Ellen's heart clenched. Dad would have been ashamed of me. Your father loved you unconditionally, Ellen corrected gently. As do I. I know that, Brandon said. But he also believed in doing what's right, no matter how hard it is. That's what you did yesterday. What I should have done weeks ago when Delilah first started pushing you out of the wedding planning. Ellen felt the walls she had built around her heart since yesterday beginning to crumble. It wasn't easy for you, she acknowledged, being caught between us. That's no excuse, Brandon insisted. You've been there for me every day since Dad died. You built a company from practically nothing while raising me on your own. You've given me everything. And I repaid you by letting someone treat you like you were invisible. His voice broke on the last word. Ellen moved to sit beside him on the sofa, taking his hand in hers. Not invisible, she corrected softly. Just forgotten for a moment. We all make mistakes, Brandon. He squeezed her hand. This was more than a mistake, Mom. This was a failure of character. But I'm going to fix it. I'm going to be better. Better how? Ellen asked. Brandon straightened, a new determination in his eyes. For starters, I'm going to stop working at Delilah's father's firm. I've already handed in my resignation. Ellen couldn't hide her surprise. Brandon, that position took years to secure. It was handed to me. he interrupted. Because of who I was dating, not because of what I could do, and every day I worked there I was reminded that I hadn't earned it. He took a deep breath. I want to work here, at Montgomery Enterprises, from the bottom, not as the boss's son. I want to learn the business the way Dad would have taught me if he'd lived, from the ground up. Ellen was speechless for a moment. Brandon had always resisted any suggestion that he join the family business, insisting he wanted to make his own way in the world of finance. You're sure about this? She finally asked. More sure than I've been about anything in a long time, he affirmed. If you'll have me, that is. Ellen felt tears threatening and blinked them back. There will always be a place for you here, Brandon, but it won't be easy. I won't treat you differently than any other employee. I wouldn't want. You two, he said firmly. As they discussed the details, he would start in the acquisitions department, under a manager who was known for being particularly demanding. Ellen felt a cautious optimism taking root. Perhaps something good could come from yesterday's disaster after all. When Brandon left, promising to return the next day to fill out the necessary paperwork, Ellen stood at her office window, watching the late afternoon sun glint off the surrounding skyscrapers. The path forward wouldn't be simple or straightforward. There would be gossip to weather, professional relationships to repair, and a long road ahead for Brandon to prove himself both to her and to the company. But for the first time since Harold's death, Ellen felt like she wasn't walking that path alone. The weeks that followed brought their share of challenges. As Ellen had predicted, Arthur Parker did his best to damage Montgomery Enterprises' reputation in financial circles. But Ellen's impeccable track record and the company's solid performance spoke louder than rumor, and by the month's end, the whispers had largely died down. Brandon started in the acquisitions department as planned, arriving early each day and often staying late. His manager, David Chen, reported that he was working harder than anyone on the team, asking intelligent questions and showing a natural aptitude for property valuation. Ellen kept her distance professionally, letting Brandon find his own way. But their personal relationship began to heal over weekly Sunday dinners at her apartment, a tradition they hadn't observed since Brandon left for college. 6 weeks after the cancelled wedding, Ellen arrived at her office to find a small package on her desk. Inside was a vintage silver compass with an inscription on the back. To find your way when the path seems unclear. The note accompanying. It read simply, "Thank you for showing me true north. Love, Brandon." Ellen was still smiling over the gift when Marcus buzzed her intercom. "Mrs. Montgomery, there's a Ms. Rivera here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says, it's important." Ms. Rivera? Ellen didn't recognize the name. "Send her in." The woman who entered was in her early 30s, with an elegant bearing and sharp, intelligent eyes. She introduced herself as Gabriela Rivera, an architect specializing in sustainable, urban development. "I appreciate you seeing me without an appointment, Mrs. Montgomery," Gabriela said as she took a seat. "I've been trying to get a meeting with your acquisitions team for weeks about a project in Queens, but I keep getting brushed off." Ellen frowned. This wasn't the first time she'd heard of promising female professionals struggling to get their foot in the door. "Tell me about your project, Ms. Rivera." Gabriela pulled out a tablet and began explaining her vision for transforming an abandoned factory complex in Queens into a mixed-use development featuring affordable housing, community spaces, and green technology. As she spoke, her passion and expertise were evident, and Ellen found herself increasingly intrigued by the proposal. "Your concept is impressive," Ellen acknowledged when Gabriela finished. "Why hasn't my team been receptive?" Gabriela's composure slipped slightly. "Honestly, I think it's because I'm a woman with a Hispanic surname, proposing a project in a neighborhood they don't see value in. They've been dismissive from the start." Ellen felt a flash of disappointment in her team, but wasn't entirely surprised. Despite her best efforts to create an inclusive culture, old biases ran deep in the real estate world. "Ms. Rivera, I'd like to review your proposal in detail. Can you leave these materials with me?" "Of course," Gabriela agreed, a cautious hope in her eyes. "And I'll be speaking with my acquisitions team about their evaluation process," Ellen added. Expect to hear from us within the week." After Gabriella left, Ellen spent the afternoon reviewing her proposal. The more she read, the more convinced she became that this project represented exactly the kind of forward-thinking, community-minded development that could set Montgomery Enterprises apart from its competitors. The next morning, Ellen called a meeting with the acquisitions team, including Brandon, who looked surprised to be included in such a high-level discussion. When everyone was seated, Ellen placed Gabriella Rivera's proposal on the table. "Would someone like to explain why this project was dismissed without a proper evaluation?" she asked, her tone level but firm. David Chen, the department head, shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Montgomery, we receive dozens of proposals each month. We can't possibly pursue all of them." "I understand that," Ellen replied. "What I don't understand is why a project with this much potential wasn't even given serious consideration." Brandon raised his hand tentatively. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the proposal. Ellen nodded and he flipped through it quickly, his brow furrowed in concentration. "I remember this," he said after a moment. "It came across my desk last week. I asked why we weren't pursuing it, and I was told the location wasn't aligned with our market strategy." Ellen raised an eyebrow at David. "Is that accurate?" David cleared his throat. "We've traditionally focused on more established areas." "You mean wealthier, whiter neighborhoods," Ellen translated bluntly. Several people around the table looked down at their notepads. "Gentlemen and ladies," she added, acknowledging the two women present. "This company was built on seeing potential where others didn't, on taking calculated risks, on innovation." She tapped the proposal. "This project embodies all of those values." She turned to Brandon. "What do you think of Ms. Rivera's concept?" Brandon seemed startled to be put on the spot, but recovered quickly. "I think it's brilliant," he said with conviction. "The sustainability features alone would put us ahead of every competitor in the city, and the community integration aspects could give us a blueprint for future developments in underserved neighborhoods." Ellen felt a surge of pride at her son's assessment. "I agree, which is why Montgomery Enterprises will be partnering with Ms. Rivera on this project." She looked around the table, her gaze challenging anyone to object. "I'll be forming a special team to work directly with her. I want recommendations for team members on my desk by end of day tomorrow." As the meeting broke up, Brandon lingered behind. "That was impressive," he told her when they were alone. "The way you handled that," Ellen smiled. "It's called leadership, Brandon. Sometimes it means making people uncomfortable when they need to grow beyond their biases." "I'd like to be on the team for Rivera's project," he said. "If you think I'm ready." Ellen considered him thoughtfully. In the weeks since he'd joined the company, Brandon had shown not just aptitude but a genuine passion for the work, something she hadn't anticipated. "It would mean extra hours," she warned him. "And you'd be working directly with me, which could be challenging." Brandon grinned. "I think I can handle it." 3 days later, Ellen hosted a dinner at her apartment for the newly formed project team and Gabriella Rivera. It was the first time she had entertained guests there since Harold's death, and as she prepared for the evening, she was surprised by how much she was looking forward to it. The dinner was a success beyond her expectations. Gabriella and the team established an immediate rapport, ideas flowing freely over good food and wine. Brandon in particular seemed to connect with Gabriella's vision, offering insights that impressed not just Ellen, but everyone at the table. As the evening wound down and the team members departed one by one, Brandon stayed behind to help Ellen clean up. They worked in companionable silence for a while, Brandon washing dishes while Ellen put away leftover food. "This feels nice," Brandon commented as he dried a wine glass. "Reminds me of when Dad was alive and you two would host dinner parties for the company. I used to hide at the top of the stairs and listen to all the grown-up talk." Ellen smiled at the memory. "Your father always knew you were there. He said you were learning the business by osmosis." Brandon set down the glass carefully. "I wish I'd paid more attention back then. To both of you. To what you were building together." "You were a child," Ellen reminded him gently. "And then I wasn't," Brandon replied. "But I still took it all for granted. Everything you sacrificed to give me opportunities, Everything you built that I could have been part of sooner if I hadn't been so determined to prove I could succeed without your help." Ellen leaned against the counter, studying her son's face. "We all have to find our own path, Brandon. There's no shame in that." "No," he agreed. "But there is in forgetting where you come from, in being ashamed of the person who made your journey possible." He set down the dish towel and met her gaze directly. "I'm not that person anymore, Mom. The one who stood silent while Delilah disrespected. You I never will be again." Ellen reached out and squeezed his hand, her throat tight with emotion. "I know," she said simply. "Have you ever struggled with standing up for yourself when it seemed like the entire world would judge you for it? Please leave your thoughts in the comments." As autumn gave way to winter, the Rivera project, officially named Riverside Commons, moved forward at an impressive pace. Gabriella proved to be not just a visionary architect, but a skilled collaborator, working seamlessly with the Montgomery team to refine the concept and secure the necessary approvals. Brandon threw himself into the project with an enthusiasm that surprised everyone except Ellen, who had always known her son's capabilities even when he hadn't recognized them himself. He developed a particular interest in the sustainability aspects of the development, researching cutting-edge green technologies and pushing the team to incorporate them into the design. One evening in early December, Ellen was working late at the office when Brandon knocked on her door, his expression a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Do you have a minute?" he asked. "There's something I want to run by you." Ellen set aside the contracts she'd been reviewing. "Of course." Brandon spread out a series of drawings on her desk, modified plans for Riverside Commons that included an expanded community center with facilities for job training, childcare, and wellness programs. "These aren't in the original budget," Ellen observed, though she was intrigued by the concept. "I know," Brandon acknowledged, "but I've been talking to community leaders in the neighborhood, and these services are what they really need. The housing is important, of course, but if we want to make a lasting difference—" He trailed off, watching her reaction anxiously. Ellen studied the plans thoughtfully. "This would significantly increase our investment without a corresponding increase in revenue." "Yes," Brandon admitted, "but what if that's okay? What if we measured success by more than just profit margins?" He hesitated, then added, "Dad used to say that business was about more than making money. It was about making a difference." Ellen felt a surge of emotion at hearing Harold's words echoed by their son. "He did say that," she confirmed softly. "Often." "So," Brandon prompted, "what do you think?" Ellen looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not just her son, but Harold's son, a young man who had found his purpose and his principles. "I think," she said slowly, "that we need to work these additions into the budget without compromising the project's overall viability. It won't be easy, but if anyone can make it work, this team can." Brandon's face lit up with a smile that reminded her so much of Harold that it almost hurt. "Thank you," he said simply. As she watched him gather up the plans, bubbling with ideas about how to adjust the financials, Ellen felt a quiet certainty settle over her. This moment of seeing her son become the man she and Harold had hoped he would be was worth far more than any wedding could have been. The weeks leading up to Christmas were hectic, with the Riverside Commons project consuming most of Ellen and Brandon's waking hours. They often worked late into the evening at the office or at Ellen's apartment, refining plans and strategies, troubleshooting obstacles, and sometimes simply enjoying each other's company in a way they hadn't in years. On Christmas Eve, they took a rare night off, sharing a quiet dinner at Ellen's apartment overlooking the city. Snow fell gently outside the windows, turning the urban landscape into a winter wonderland of glittering lights. "I have something for you," Brandon said as they finished their meal. He handed Ellen a small wrapped package. Inside was a silver-framed photograph she had never seen before, Harold holding an infant Brandon, his face alight with pride and joy. Ellen's breath caught in her throat. "Where did you find this?" she asked, touching the image of her husband's face gently. "In Dad's old files at the office," Brandon explained. "I've been going through them, trying to understand his vision for the company better. There was a whole box of personal photos he kept there." He hesitated, then added, I think he kept them close because he never wanted to forget what he was working for, his family. Ellen felt tears welling up. "Thank you," she whispered. "This is perfect." Brandon cleared his throat, suddenly looking nervous. "There's something else I wanted to talk to you about, actually. Something I've been thinking about since the wedding that wasn't." Ellen set the photo carefully on the table. "What is it?" "I want to create a foundation," Brandon said in a rush. "The Harold Montgomery Foundation for Community Development, using some of my trust fund money as seed capital to support projects like Riverside Commons in other underserved neighborhoods." He watched her face anxiously. "What do you think?" Ellen felt something shift inside her, the final piece of a puzzle falling into place. This was Harold's legacy. Not just Montgomery Enterprises, not just the fortune they had built, but this. Their son becoming a man who understood that wealth came with responsibility. That business could be a force for good in the world. "I think," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion she felt, "that your father would be incredibly proud of you, as am I." Brandon's smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. "So you'll help me set it up?" "Of course," Ellen promised. "But Brandon, this is your vision. You should lead it." As they discussed the details of the foundation, Ellen found herself thinking of that moment in the Parkview Manor ballroom, when Delilah had suggested she wait in the kitchen. At the time, it had felt like the lowest point of her life, a public humiliation, a rejection by her own son. Now, 6 months later, she could almost feel grateful for it. Without that moment, without the painful clarity it had brought, none of this would be happening. Sometimes, Ellen realized, the biggest blessings arrived disguised as moments of heartbreak. The new year brought fresh challenges and opportunities. The Riverside Commons project broke ground in February, with Ellen and Brandon standing side by side at the ceremony, hard hats on and shovels in hand. Gabriela Rivera's innovative design had garnered national attention, with several architectural publications featuring it as the future of urban development. The Harold Montgomery Foundation launched with considerable fanfare, thanks in part to Jessica, now thriving in her role at Montgomery Enterprises, who had organized a gala that attracted New York's elite. Brandon spoke eloquently about his father's values and vision, moving many in the audience to tears, and more importantly, to open their checkbooks. As winter melted into spring, Ellen found herself reflecting on the remarkable journey of the past year. From the cancelled wedding to the foundation's launch, from Brandon's return to the family business to the groundbreaking Riverside project, it had been a year of transformation, of rediscovery, of growth. One sunny April afternoon, Ellen decided to take a rare lunch break away from the office. She found herself drawn to the Harbor Cafe, where she had sat alone the day of the cancelled wedding. This time, however, as she settled at a table overlooking the water, she didn't feel the weight of loss or rejection. Instead, she felt a sense of peace, of completion. "Mrs. Montgomery," a hesitant voice interrupted her thoughts. Ellen looked up to find a young woman standing beside her table, elegantly dressed in a conservative suit. It took her a moment to place the face. One of Delilah's bridesmaids, the daughter of a prominent banking family. "Rebecca, isn't it?" Ellen said, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. "Would you like to join me?" Rebecca sat down gingerly, clearly nervous. "I wasn't sure you'd remember me." "Of course I do," Ellen replied. "You were very kind to me during the wedding preparations. One of the few who was," she added with a small smile. Rebecca fidgeted with her napkin. "That's actually why I wanted to speak with you, to apologize for not saying something when she suggested you should stay in the kitchen." She looked up, her expression earnest. "It was wrong. And I knew it was wrong, but I didn't say anything. I've regretted that ever since." Ellen was touched by the young woman's sincerity. "That's very thoughtful of you, Rebecca, but you have nothing to apologize for." "I do, though," Rebecca insisted, "because I watched you walk away that day, and I thought about how I would have felt if someone had treated my mother that way. And then later, when I heard what you'd done." She hesitated. "Everyone was shocked, of course, but privately, I think a lot of us were impressed. It took courage to do what you did." Ellen studied the young woman thoughtfully. "Sometimes," she said. "The most courageous thing we can do is refuse to accept disrespect, even when it would be easier to stay silent." "I'm learning that," Rebecca said with a small smile. "Actually, that's the other reason I wanted to talk to you. I'm graduating from business school next month, and I'm looking for opportunities in real estate development. Your company's work with the Riverside Commons project is exactly the kind of socially responsible development I want to be part of." Ellen raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Are you asking me for a job, Rebecca?" The young woman straightened her shoulders. "Yes, Mrs. Montgomery, I am. And unlike the last time we met, I'm not going to let fear stop me from going after what I want." Ellen couldn't help but smile at her boldness. "Send your resume to my office," she said. "I can't promise anything, but I appreciate initiative." As Rebecca thanked her and departed, Ellen turned back to the view of the harbor, thinking about how far she had come from that day, almost a year ago, when she had sat in this same spot, alone and hurt, but fiercely determined not to be diminished by anyone. She had cancelled a wedding but gained so much more: a renewed relationship with her son, a revitalized sense of purpose for her company, and the knowledge that standing up for herself, even at great cost, had been worth every penny. Ellen Montgomery had always known her own worth, and now so did everyone else. The day of what would have been Brandon and Delilah's first anniversary dawned bright and clear, a perfect spring morning in New York City. Ellen woke early, as was her habit, but instead of immediately checking her emails or reviewing the day's schedule, she took a moment to enjoy the sunlight streaming through her bedroom windows, illuminating the silver-framed photo of Harold and baby Brandon that now sat on her nightstand. So much had changed in a year. The Riverside Commons project was well underway, transforming a once-neglected corner of Queens into a vibrant community. Brandon had grown into his role at Montgomery Enterprises with remarkable speed and confidence, earning the respect of colleagues who had initially dismissed him as the boss's son. The Harold Montgomery Foundation had funded 3 new community development projects in underserved neighborhoods across the city, and Ellen herself had changed too. She had always been strong, always been capable, but now there was a new dimension to her strength, a willingness to be vulnerable, to reach out, to build connections beyond the boardroom. Her phone chimed with a text from Brandon. "Breakfast at Bluestone Cafe? Got big news to share." Ellen smiled and texted back her agreement. Bluestone was one of Harold's favorite breakfast spots, a cozy diner not far from their first apartment. Brandon had been rediscovering many of his father's haunts lately, as if trying to reclaim the connection that had been overshadowed by years of taking his mother's sacrifices for granted. When Ellen arrived at the cafe, Brandon was already there, nursing a cup of coffee and looking uncharacteristically nervous. He stood as she approached, giving her a quick hug before they both sat down. "So," Ellen said after they had ordered, "what's this big news?" Brandon took a deep breath. "I've met someone," he said, a smile spreading across his face. "Her name is Gabriela." Ellen's eyebrows shot up. "Gabriela Rivera? Our Gabriela?" Brandon nodded, looking both sheepish and delighted. "We've been spending a lot of time together on the Riverside project, and it just happened. She's incredible, Mum. Brilliant, passionate, principled, everything I never knew I wanted until I found it." Ellen thought about the architect who had walked into her office a year ago, determined and uncompromising in her vision for a better community. She thought about her son, who had found his own purpose and principles through reconnecting with his father's legacy. The match made perfect sense. "I'm happy for you," she said sincerely. "Gabriela is an extraordinary woman." "She is," Brandon agreed, his eyes soft with an emotion Ellen recognized instantly. It was the same look Harold had given her countless times over their years together, a mixture of love, admiration, and gratitude. "And there's more," he continued. "I'm going to ask her to marry me." Ellen felt her heart swell with joy. "Brandon, that's wonderful. But I wanted to talk to you. First," he hurried on, "after last time, I want to do everything differently. I want a small ceremony, something meaningful rather than showy." And most importantly, he reached across the table to take her hand. I want you involved in every step. No one is putting my mother in the kitchen this time." Ellen squeezed his hand, moved by his sincerity. "I appreciate that, but Brandon, this is your and Gabriella's day. You should plan what feels right for the two of you." Brandon shook his head firmly. "What feels right is honoring the people who matter most to us. Gabriella feels the same way. Her parents sacrificed everything to give her opportunities. She would never want them sidelined, and neither would I. Not again." As they finished their breakfast, making plans and sharing ideas, Ellen felt a sense of completion, of things coming full circle. The wedding that never happened had cleared the way for something far more meaningful. Not just a marriage, but a true partnership between two people who valued family, community, and purpose. Later that afternoon, Ellen stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows in her office, looking out at the city she had helped shape over the past 16 years. From this height, she could see all the way to Queens, where Riverside Commons was rising. From the old factory grounds, a testament to vision, perseverance, and the courage to stand firm in one's values, her intercom buzzed. "Mrs. Montgomery," Marcus announced, "the board members are assembled for the quarterly meeting." "Thank you, Marcus," Ellen replied. "I'll be right there." As she gathered her materials and headed for the boardroom, Ellen thought about the difference a year could make. She had lost a daughter-in-law she never quite connected with, and gained a future daughter-in-law, whose values aligned perfectly with the Montgomery legacy. She had nearly lost her company's reputation and instead enhanced it through innovative, community-focused projects. She had risked her relationship with her son by taking a stand and ultimately strengthened it beyond what she had thought possible. Sometimes the best things in life came from moments of difficult choice, from refusing to accept less than you deserved, from standing in your truth even when it would be easier to sit quietly in the kitchen. Ellen Montgomery straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and walked into the boardroom ready to lead, not from the shadows but from the head of the table where she belonged. "Congratulations, type 9 in the comments so that I know you stayed until the end with me." Thank you for watching, and until tomorrow's story on this same channel.